So in terms of where the light is in my picture, the light is up here, and the light is coming down onto the object from this upper angle like this. And so the top of the apple is illuminated. Now I want to show you, what do you notice about where the shadow is on the apple? If we were to measure from the top to the bottom, technically where the shadow breaks is really in the center. So I'm filling in where I'm seeing shadow break. What do you notice about that shape? It's following the cross contour right around and filling in the entire underside of that object. So in this case, if I look at any of these segments of the apple, each one of those little segments is what we would refer to as a plane. And a plane is a segment on a form that faces a direction. So what do we notice about all those planes? Where are they facing? If I look at this plane, it's facing here. If I look at this plane, it's facing like this. If I look at this plane, it's kind of coming towards us. This plane is facing a little to this way. This plane is facing a little this way. I can keep tracing what I'd call the perpendicular angle off of the plane, and notice what way those are going. They're pointing upward and slightly outward, but there's a place down here that they face differently. So yes, they're all facing upward and slightly outward. The most upward ones are in the very middle, aren't they? And then as we move off the shoulders of the apple, they start to radiate. But are they facing sideways? Not at all. If I draw a horizontal line, every one of those angles that I've drawn with an arrow is facing up away from that horizontal line. So we call those like-facing planes. And I'm going to be careful, I'm using a K there, like, not light. But in this case, they're also light-facing planes. Because the light, as we said, is coming from up here, and the light rays are coming down. And so when these angles meet each other, it's like they grasp hands and shake hands. So I know where light is going to fall on this object based on the way that the plane is facing. And in this case, these planes are all facing in a like direction. Now we use that term, they're not exact the same, right? So we use the term like facing because they face in a similar direction to one another. What else in this still life is facing that way as a plane? Notice the floor right here is a plane that's facing upward toward the light source. In this case, we have parts of the apple and the floor that are what we call like-facing planes. They're facing in the same common direction. And let's, for instance, look at this plane. What direction is it facing? This way. How about this one? This one's kind of coming toward me, but horizontally. What about this one? It's coming again toward me, but horizontally. What about this one? And what about the ones underneath? Let's do purple. How about this one right there? That one's facing downward and sideways. How about this one here? That one's facing kind of toward the floor. How about the one next to it here? Again, it's facing toward the floor, and we can clearly see this one, because of this angle, is facing down toward the floor. So each of these planes is facing in a different direction. It's like all these planes have lines that radiate from them. And depending on the direction of those planes, they're going to be affected by light in a different way. Do you see the pattern? It's a wonderful pattern because we have this entire top of the apple to this point here that's all facing up toward the light. We have the middle of the apple. It's almost like a belt that's running around the apple. That's facing sideways. It's like imagine spokes on a wheel, and I could go around and around, back in the backside if I could see it, and that would be like an ellipse running right around the apple. And all of that bottom segment from here down to here, and it happens to be dividing into about thirds, so this section is all facing toward the floor like that. But why is the darkest part of the apple in the middle? Do you remember which way these planes were facing? They were facing the floor. What's happening when they hit the floor? What's coming from here? Some light. Where is that? What is that light doing? That light is coming from the lamp down, hitting the floor and bouncing this way. That's the law of reflection. So where is that light going to go? It's going to lightly go down here where it can. How about up in this area where the X's are? It can't get there because if it bounces off the area that would bounce there, what is it hitting? It's hitting its own cast shadow, so there is no light coming from the cast shadow. So the darkest part of the apple is going to be what we call the core of the shadow. And that again follows the concept of planes. Planes define the third dimension. What I want to do now is talk to you a little bit about the cast shadow on the floor of the apple and its relationship to all these things we've talked about. So do you remember our light source is coming in from this direction up here? What do you notice about the place on that form? We talked about it earlier where the light breaks to shadow on the apple. If we drew that as a line, would you agree that that line would be right here? It would kind of bump its way along a little bit because the apple's imperfect. Now, what if I have X-ray vision and I could see around my apple? The back side of that apple, this line doesn't end, does it? We talked about this before. We're going to kind of put this all together. This line keeps going around the back side of the apple until it comes out on the other side. Are you seeing what I just drew there? This idea that there's an ellipse that goes around that whole apple and it goes even behind it. So this is where it gets really cool, in my opinion, because if we think about the direction of light, and we think about the fact that the edge of that object as an ellipse is the place where the light changes to shadow, then all of the rays of light that are coming down and hitting the apple above that line are going to illuminate all that area above. All that area above is going to be illuminated. At this point here is here. At this point here is here. At this point here is right there. If I could go behind the apple to this quadrant here, it would come down and we would just see it right there. And this one equally would come down. We'd see it just peeking behind the apple like that. You see the kind of curtain of space that we're talking about? If I draw the shape of the cast shadow, what do you notice about those two shapes? Do you see the cylinder? So all of the shadow space, in this case, it's acting like a cylinder under the object.